So, hi there, I'm Joost van Dongen. I'm CEO and Creative Director of Galaxy Grove, and I'll be talking about speedrunning a new studio. And I have too many slides, so I will probably also be speedrunning this presentation. This talk is actually not going to be me just going over the steps of founding the studio. Instead, I'm going to talk about my vision on games, business, and creativity, and I'll explain these things through a number of key steps in Galaxy Grove. So, I'll start with a short introduction of who I am. So, well, I'm Joost, and I'm founder and CEO and creative director of Galaxy Grove. We make management games. We specialize in this genre. We've been around for almost 3 years now. We're in Utrecht. We're 16 people, and we're growing quickly. We're hiring 5 more people in the next months. And these are the 2 games that we've made so far. Station to Station, released in October 23, and Town to City releases in a few months. And before founding Galaxy Grove, I was co-founder and technical director at Ronimo. We made these games, Astronauts being the most famous one of these. It sold 2 million copies. And I also made weird solo experimental games like these. Craziest of these is Cello Fortress, which is a game where I sit live on a stage, just like this, playing a cello. And the cello is rigged into the computer and controls the game, and I play against people in the audience who have an Xbox controller. Doesn't get much more crazy than that. So I like a lot of different things. I like business, and I like crazy experimental stuff, and everything in between. And I also have a dev blog. It's been a while since I last posted there, but there's over 100 in-depth articles about game development and art and business and everything, basically. So before I get to the meat of it, I should give a short disclaimer. I hope this talk has a bunch of useful lessons. Nevertheless, if you would follow all these things, that doesn't mean that you're automatically also successful, because there's luck that factors in, of course. I have had a bunch of luck. Being an industry veteran, I have quite a strong reputation. That helps a lot in opening doors, being able to say, oh, I made a game that sold 2 million copies. And of course, I'm a middle-aged white dude, and I've heard that that helps as well. Before I continue, I'm curious, how many people here were yesterday at Philomena's talk from Stray Fawn? Okay, cool, a lot. So this is going to be really fun. It was a great talk, and I agree with all of it, but you'll see that this presentation says the opposite about almost everything. There are many different ways of doing things, and none of that is critique on the way she does things. In fact, a lot of what she said is things that we did at Ronimo. So yeah, there are many ways of doing things. That's basically a summary. So in 2021, I left Ronimo, the studio I co-founded. I wanted a new start, and I wanted to be a solo boss instead of being one of 7 founders. And I had a mind full of plans, and I had been saving for 15 years because I'm just always trying to save money. And that gave me enough runway to work on the new thing for about 1.5 years. In case anyone wonders, Ronimo never actually made us rich. It just paid our wages, and we spent all the money making more games. So first thing I did when I left was build RoboMaestro. RoboMaestro is an experimental thing. It's a procedural music toy. I felt, well, before I start a new game, I should do something crazy once. This is for free on Steam, so you can give it a try. And I used this as a test bed because I wanted to learn new tech. I wanted to learn Unreal, wanted to learn Blender. And I figured, well, best way to really master these things before hiring people and telling people how to make a game in Unreal, I should maybe do it myself. So this was a learning process, but also just a fun project to do. So Galaxy Grove, I already mentioned, I left with a mind full of plans. And yeah, I'd like to talk about that for a bit. And in terms of where I got inspiration, well, I'd say about 50% of Galaxy Grove is things that I liked that we did at Ronimo. The other 50% is the inverse of things that I did not like at Ronimo. So it's a mix, but a lot of it is inspired by Ronimo either way. And a bunch of studios, mostly from friends of mine that inspired me. Several, like Keoken, the Dutch studio. Yeah. So, have a strategy. This talk is partially going to be me preaching and saying, you should do this, you should do this. And the first one is have a strategy. And we make great games. That's not a strategy. Everyone wants to make great games. A real strategy is more in-depth than that. And it provides focus, and it makes decisions much easier. If you're like, oh, I like this, and then your co-founder says, but I like this, then you quickly get into this super subjective discussion where you both just like something. But if there's a strategy, if there's a long-term goal, then you can add the argument, which of these two things will actually contribute to achieving our goal? And often one of them clearly is the better one when that argument comes on the table. So it makes decisions easier to have a strategy. It aligns the team, it allows planning ahead, you'll see more of that during this talk, and it also makes it possible to get an investor. If you don't have a real strategy, if you don't have a long-term goal, then you can basically skip talking to investors. They will not invest in you unless you're extremely lucky, but normally they won't. So an example of a strategy is our strategy, of course, because I was going to talk about Galaxy growth. So our strategy has two halves. One is that we want to build an audience. We want to build a fan base so that every next game is easier and cheaper to market. How do we want to do this? By staying within one genre, by having yearly releases so that our audience doesn't forget us. This requires having multiple teams, because a game takes longer than a year to make in our case. Whenever we have a successful IP, we want to expand on it, and we want to do post-launch updates again to keep our audience engaged. Again, this is a goal. I'm not saying that we are here already, but this is what we want to achieve. And the point of a strategy is that it should be ambitious, like a point on the horizon, something you could dream about. The other half is that we want to be kings of lean. We want to work very efficiently. We want to compete with the top games in our genre, but with much smaller budgets, much like Benelux did here. So we want to have smaller teams than the other games here. We want to achieve that using modern tools, very focused development, choosing very sharply what's in the game, and we want to be able to reuse things between our games. And here you can see how these two halves of the strategy fit into each other. By staying within one genre, we allow for a lot more reuse. By building a fan base, we make marketing cheaper, so we're more lean. So these things work together. Then a slide about me 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was very much in the field of, I just want to have fun, make cool games, and that's it. And business is just a necessary evil. The thing is that if you think like that, then you probably end up having less money. And if you have less money, then you have less creative freedom, because making games costs money, unless it's very small games. So ideally, the business enables your creativity to make games. Otherwise, you're always making these small things. So don't be Joost from 10 years ago. Didn't have a beard yet then either. Don't be a person without a beard, I guess. No. That was poor advice. Don't follow that advice. Okay, so that was the plan. And Station to Station was the first step towards that plan. Station to Station is a minimalist management game. In other words, it's a puzzle game that looks like a management game. The reason for that is that management games are pretty complex and pretty big to build, and I wanted to start with something small and then grow from there. Again, we had a strategy, or I had a strategy at that point, and this was like a step in that strategy. Staying hydrated is also a great strategy. So I wanted to first make something simpler, and this launched in October 23. So I also said that we want to be lean, work efficiently. So the prototype for this I made in just 3 months. This was still on my own. Then I spent 4 months pitching, and that got me a deal. And with that publishing deal, I was able to hire a small team, and then full production took 13 months with a team of 5 people. This means that from first prototype to signed deal was 7 months. That is exceptionally fast. That's luck, and maybe also skill, I don't know. But if you're going to plan, do not assume you can do it this quickly. Getting a deal in 6 months is very fast, and that excludes the prototyping. So expect way more time for this than 7 months. So how are we so fast? Well, one aspect is that we're actually very slow. I believe in slow burning creativity. What I mean by that is that it's good to be in the creative mindset all the time. Look at the world with your designer mindset. And since we have a strategy, I can look at everything with a, giving a talk in this hall, what would that game be like? I can look at the world like that. And often it turns out to be a boring game, or there's no game or whatever. But sometimes there's something interesting there. And then I write that down, and I'm constantly writing down ideas. And slowly those ideas come together, and some of them turn into complete games instead of just a random bit. And that means that by the time I actually started, I had a bunch of ideas to choose from. And right now, I have like 5 different game pitches lying around that I could literally have a team start on tomorrow, because I slowly grew that. Then another thing that's important for being fast and efficient is decision making. In creative processes, it's hard to make choices, because you're always like, oh, but there might be a cooler thing. But at some point, you just need to decide, and you need to know when the moment is where you should not be delaying anymore. And something I've done in the past is, I think this is cool, and someone else thinks this is cool, and okay, let's prototype both, and then the prototype will tell us which was the coolest idea. That works, but it costs a lot of time, and it costs a lot of money to prototype a lot of different ideas to pick one. So what I do now is just pick the one that seems best. If you then build it, and it's actually okay, then you keep going with it. If it then turns out to be bad, then you can always roll back. Because in most cases, when you can't clearly decide, they're probably both okay. So just pick something. And also accept that some people in your team will not like it. If there's more than one person, then almost always there are cases where people disagree. And you should not try to please everyone, just make a clear decision. In the end, that's nicer for everyone. Then another thing, guard scope with your life. This is super hard for game creators. You always want bigger, better, cool ideas. Oh, now I found out this thing. I'm going to put it in as well. The number one way to not crunch and to meet your deadlines and to not go over budget is to be much more sharp with this. Cut your cool ideas when needed. Don't cut all your cool ideas, but cut enough cool ideas that the game fits within the budget that you have in mind, within the timeline that you have in mind. And of course, it sucks to do that, and your team will hate you for killing the feature that they loved, but they will also thank you because they don't have to crunch and you don't go bankrupt because you went over budget. Employees tend to love it when the company doesn't go bankrupt. I jest, but I genuinely believe that that's a very important reason for a lot of bankruptcies. And another thing is I love milestone schedules because, well, if you work with a publisher, then usually as a developer you can propose the milestone schedule. So it's something that I wrote and they just gave feedback on, and then we iterate on it together a bit. So it's not like someone forces something on me. It's me forcing something on myself. And the milestone schedule helps me to stay within budget, because as soon as I see, oh, hey, this item said this milestone said we should have this thing, but we don't have it yet, or it's there, but it's not as good as it should be. And oh, we're running out. We need to cut something later in development so that we can actually still finish the game in time. So I use the milestone schedule to constantly monitor whether we're on time. And now you might think, okay, but you're working with publishers. Publishers not going to accept when you cut a cool feature. Actually, they are. Publisher wants you to make a great game. They don't want you to make feature X, feature Y, and feature Z. They want a great game. That's what they want. And if you're very open with the publisher, you communicate well with the publisher, then they're actually very flexible. So don't treat the publisher as a client that you need to pretend that everything is going well. No, instead be very open about everything that's going wrong. Then they trust you and they see that they can trust you because you're not pretending, you're not lying to them. And then when you run over time, you can actually have a decent conversation about this, and they're very flexible in this. Down the City has a bunch of features that were cut, that were in the pitch, and that were in the signed contract, and they were just like, okay, yeah, it'll be a great game without, and then you don't run over budget. We like games to not run over budget. So, those were a few things about how to work efficiently, and my vision on that. So our second game, Down to City, this is a city builder with voxel art, so this time it's a real management game. It mixes management and beautification. It's a bit like Tiny Glade meets Anno. Here the prototype again took 3 months. This time I didn't work on it at all. 2 people from my team made that. And pitching took 5 months, so it was again very fast. And the demo actually went live on Steam yesterday, if you want to give it a try. It's releasing later this year. So, got a deal quickly, again. Partially luck, again, but also partially not luck and doing things well. And I'd like to talk a bit about that. So one thing I do is that I pitch to everyone. Every publisher I can find that I feel that might be even remotely relevant, I just pitch to them. It doesn't take that much to send an email. It doesn't take that much time to do a call or set up a meeting with me to match. I literally pitched this game to 70 different publishers, and only one of them offered me a deal in the end. So pitch to everyone. And don't be like, oh, that publisher is not so cool because someone said that it did something 5 years ago. Just pitch to him. It's better to have a deal with a mediocre publisher than not have a deal and go bankrupt. And another aspect is think about what publishers want. So what do publishers want? Well, there's a lot of information about this. They want a prototype and a lot of stuff that I'm not going to repeat there. Just search it on the internet. But a few things that I think are important that are not always mentioned is one thing is you should base your budget on what's relevant in today's market. 10 years ago, it used to be quite common for an indie to be like, okay, we have a cool game. We came up with this idea, we planned it, this is what we need to make it, and then you just go to someone to fund it, or you self-fund it, or whatever. So the game defined the budget. In today's market, this does not work. The reason for this is that there's a lot of, that every type of game has a certain maximum budget, and above that, the chances of making back that money is just too small. So the thing is, once you know roughly what you want, then you should do market research and be like, okay, this is the maximum budget it can have. How can I change the scope of this concept to fit that? And sometimes the answer is, well, if I do that, then it's a shitty game. And then you should just cancel the game altogether, come up with something different. Because you need something that actually has a budget that you can reasonably make back. And a rough idea here, if it sells mediocre, it should make back 2 times the budget. It shouldn't just be profitable when it's a hit. And another important thing to me, this links to what Rami said yesterday about hooks. I think every game should be able to sell itself within 5 seconds of video. There should be something super exciting about it that you can communicate in just 5 seconds. So if you have this super cool, innovative, really deep game mechanic that after a few hours of playing you start to get into, that's great, keep it in the game, but that's not your hook. Your hook needs to be sold within 5 seconds. So here's Balatro, roguelike poker, No Man's Sky. It's infinite, you can fly everywhere. You can make a video, or just an accelerated video of a plane taking off on a planet and then going to another planet and landing there in its full detail. And that's just incredibly exciting. And for station to station and town to city, the visual style is the hook. It's not as strong as hook as the other 2 games, but it is a fine hook. The announcement video of Town to City showed 0 gameplay and got 500,000 views. Because it's just a strong visual hook, or that visual style. Then, the future. Bum, bum, bum. So we already have our 3rd game in pre-production. It is still unannounced, so I'm not going to say anything about it. But that's a thing. And I'd like to talk a bit about, okay, why do we have a 3rd game in pre-production already? Who here knows what a liquidity forecast is? Well, you can read it now, but who already knew? Okay. That's not enough hands. Everyone should know, but that's why I'm telling now. A liquidity forecast is basically just a spreadsheet that has estimated income and expenses for the future. Like every month, how much are you going to spend on everything? On hardware, on software, on wages, on rent, on lunch, everything that the company spends, everything that comes in. Update it monthly based on your real expenses so that you have a decent idea of what the future will bring. And I make them pretty pessimistic, so I assume that sales of all our games will suck. And then I still try to have a healthy financial situation. If you have that, then you can analyze what's happening. In this case, what I noticed a while ago is that the amount of time after release of Town to City, if Town to City was not a hit, to get the next game signed was just enough. And just enough is a huge risk, because it means that if it takes longer to get your prototype, or if you're not lucky with the first pitches, then it's not enough and you're bankrupt. So like, okay, what do I do about this? I started fiddling around with the liquidity forecast and found, oh, if I hire 2 more people now, then we run out of money sooner. Yes, that's what I wanted. No, but we do run out of money sooner. But the thing is that by starting prototyping very early, I could start pitching way, way earlier. And then those few months, fewer runway actually turn into, but we have more than half a year extra time to get a deal signed. This is very scary. This feels very aggressive. If you're like, ooh, we're short of money, let's hire more people. But it's actually very good business. It's very clever, and it's good for the stability for the company. And with a liquidity forecast, you can see these kinds of things ahead. So in general, even if you don't do it that way, get started on your next game sooner. Like everyone here who runs a company, if you're not thinking about your next game before the current one is finished, then you're too late. Especially the first phase of development, like the prototyping and thinking and discussing with the team what would be cool. These cost a lot of time, and they're actually better if they're not hurried. So if you wait until your game is finished, then you're spending a lot of money on your own wages while discussing things. Well, you could have done this before, and it's hard. I know you're finishing your game, you're fully focused on that one game, and then trying to get out of that and focus on something else as well is very hard. But it helps so much for the stability of your company if you do this. So spend a little bit less on your current game and accept that it'll have, okay, there's a little bit less polish, or maybe there's 1 level extra, but instead we have a prototype for the new game already. That makes a huge difference. So final topic I'd like to touch on, we have an investment deal almost finished. So publisher is a deal for a game, investor is a company that gives you a bunch of money and in exchange gets a percentage of the company. So investor doesn't give me money, they give the company money that we can grow the company with. With this investment money, we can get 2 more games into pre-production in September, we can grow the studio. All of them will still be management games, because I had this strategy. And we're growing to 21 people this autumn and 25 next year. So to get an investor, or actually all BizDev, is better if you do it all the time instead of just the moments when you need something. If you build a network all the time, then you have more opportunities. In case of this investor, I've been chatting with them for over 2 years before they gave green lights. They even said no early on, but I just kept regularly updating them. And at some point they were like, hey, all those things that you said you were going to do, you're actually doing all of them. Maybe we should give you money after all, because you're actually successful at this. And then they gave me an offer in a time when everyone was saying, investors don't do studios that make games anymore. Just not at all. And right when I was like, okay, I'm going to give this up, no one's going to give me money, they came back, hey, want money? Which is really nice. Really nice when people come to, hey, want money? It's a little bit more complex to that, but that's the summary of it. So BizDev is something that you should be doing throughout the existence of your company, and not just the moments when you need money, because it's much easier to get money if you do it all the time. And as to why I want an investor, well, most important reason is to spread risk so that we have some financial buffer, so that if something goes wrong, we don't immediately see the bottom of the barrel. It allows us to grow further. I wanted this idea of a game every year, or maybe even more, build an audience, stuff like that. We need enough teams for that, and I need budget to get that started. Another reason is that when I left Ronimo, one thing I had in mind was, oh, now I want to be ambitious with the business. Just for the fun of it, because at Ronimo we were always like, oh, we just do what's fun. And I was like, now this seemed fun to me. And it's an exciting new adventure for me to work with an investor. So on a personal level, it's fun. And on a company level, I think it's a super good idea. So that's why an investor. So conclusions is actually a summary of the most important parts, as you might have noticed. This was more preaching than telling about the history of Galaxy Growth. These are basically the points that I preached. Have a real strategy, do business development all the time, get started on your next game sooner, do concepts that can be sold in 5 seconds of video, whatever that means. It must have a very strong hook. Market is way, way, way too competitive for games to make it if they don't have this. Be lean. The corona times of infinite money being thrown at the games industry are over, and they're probably not coming back anytime soon, so work efficiently and base your budget on the market. And yeah, we're hiring soon for a number of roles. Job openings for this are not yet open, but if this sounds interesting, then come say hi today. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joost. You've been actually speeding along through it very well. We still have some time for audience questions. Please raise your hand, and I'll. There's a lot of hands, and the mic will find its way to you.
Thanks for the talk. Super, super good. I do wonder, how does a publisher fit into your long-term company goals?
Yeah, the idea is that I believe that in the current market, a great game has a 25% chance of making its money back. It's that bad, in my opinion. So if you're releasing one game a year and you're doing it with your own money, and there's 25%, like with the company's money, and there's 25% chance of making that money back, that's a terrible bargain. If you don't have the money to make 4 games, and one of them will be a hit. So my strategy is let the publisher take that risk, because they release a lot of games, so they can spread that risk, which I can't. And then build a fan base. And then once we have a fan base, those odds go up enormously, because then we know we're giving them what they are already liking, and they already know us. And at that point, we want to move to self-publishing. And until that point, we work with publishers. That's the idea.
Hi, Joost. Thank you. Very good talk. I have one question. Might be a little bit touchy, but I'm still going to ask it. When you pitched your first game, so Station to Station, in the prototype phase, did you lean on your reputation with Ronimo in order to secure talks, or was it just a clean slate?
Of course I leaned on that reputation. I mentioned it in as one of the disclaimers at the start as well, because like a prototype needs to do a few things. It needs to show the hook, it needs to show that it's a great game, but it also needs to prove that you can make this game. And the proof that you can make this game part, like I came in saying, I'm going to hire 4 people, but I don't have them yet. I have this prototype, I'm going to hire 4 people. Usually that's an instant no. But I could say, hey, and I already did that before. I built a successful company, I hired a bunch of people. So people believed that I could do that. And if I didn't have that, then I would have had to have several team members who were ready to sign already. Well, I had one actually who was ready to sign, and that helped. But I would also have needed a much more advanced prototype to prove that I could pull it off.
All right, thank you.
Well, sorry. We'll have to go proximity first.
Thank you. I'm reminded a little bit of Lauren Lanning and his career. He talks a bit about a talkies moment, so the moment where he saw an opportunity and he took it, and it was very profitable for him, coupled with his business approach where he had to learn a lot about business, not because he wanted to, but because he needed to. In how so far do you see yourself in this? Was going out there by yourself, was that a talkies moment for you? Were there lessons learned? And how far was this something you had to do versus something you wanted to do?
I would say that it's not a I see an opportunity kind of thing, because I'm actually pretty bad at that. I had a colleague at Ronimo who was super good at it and always saw the next trend a year ahead. And then a year later, we were always like, shit, we should have done what he said. I'm not that guy. I'm really passionate about management game, and I left because I wanted to make the games that I play. And I don't play multiplayer games myself. So at some point, I wanted to leave. That's the reason.
Hi, you mentioned not being picky with publishers, but how do you make sure that like the same thing that happened at Disco Elysium doesn't happen to your game, where the kind of investor like completely takes over the company and kicks you out? You know, that kind of worst case scenario.
That entirely depends on what deal you strike with them. Make sure that the contract doesn't say that they can. I often hear that people, for example, in case of investors, are afraid that they can decide to kill your company or something like that. But that only happens if you're out of money and you need extra money for them. If you just get a bunch of money and your plan is sound and doesn't need a next round, for example, then they have much less power. So I don't know the details of what happened in the case you mentioned, but I think it's a matter of understanding the contracts you sign and understanding under which circumstances this can happen and avoiding those situations.
So you clearly have a clear studio strategy, and you have plans to grow quickly. Some challenge that studios often face when growing quickly is a diminishing quality of culture. As you grow so quickly, do you have any longer-term vision in place for your culture that you're trying to enforce?
Well, I basically have a whip. Whenever they do something that's not according to culture, I'm like, bam! No. This is a very relevant question for me right now, because for the first time in my career, I'm going to hire middle management. Like I'm going to hire a senior producer and a lead artist, and I've never had those work under me in the hierarchy. So this is a very interesting thing for me as well. But so far what I've seen is that if the company culture is very clear and it's something that fits the people, then so far it has been very possible to just show them how we do things, and occasionally it goes wrong, and then if you can make it explicit what went wrong exactly, then you can teach them. Like for the third game, I hired 2 new people, and they're doing exceptionally well, by the way. Yeah, Ramon is over there. But they had one point where I was like, okay, where they went really deep on the math on one topic, and then maybe wasted a week on that or 2 weeks, and then we had a conversation about, okay, but this is early prototyping, and this is how we work. So there was a learning moment, and it cost some time. But then again, new people wasting two weeks once, that's like, whatever. That's a very small waste. So yeah, it's something that I work and try to be very explicit on how I want that to be. But I'm sure it's going to be a struggle as we grow.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for, but I'm sure Joost is up to answering more questions if you come up to him and talk to him. Yeah.
Yep, I'll be outside.
Thank you, Joost.